All right, it's time to pull up a chair and talk some Dynasty football. Welcome to the Ride or Dynasty podcast. I am your host, JJ Wenner, and I am excited for the next series of podcasts because it is time for our Dynasty ranking shows. Now, we have a full house tonight with 3 kings and 2 jokers. Now I know would be a 5 of a kind, but the joke didn't really work unless I said it that way. But I'll let the riders decide which is which. Joining me are Eric Braun.
Hey, everybody.
Don Detweiler.
Hey, guys. Good to see you all again.
Kyle Allen.
How's it going, riders?
And my man, Michael Kloss.
How's it going, JJ? Excited to be here. I want to make sure everyone knows that these pods, a lot of our content, which we have new writers we talked about last week, all available at our site, riderdynasty.com. It's constantly being updated, so head over that direction.
And to add to that, you can also find all of our rankings that we'll be talking about listed on the site, so check those out as well, and be sure to like the podcast and follow us on Twitter.
Tonight we're going to talk about our latest Dynasty quarterback rankings, but before we do that, let's check in on the news.
Hall of Fame ceremony has been postponed and the game is canceled. What does this mean, Michael?
It means the NFL is doing the right thing in light of all of this COVID nonsense. There are probably too many people that would have gone to that. It's, less preseason football, and I mean, that makes me sad. But I think in the current environment, we all need to be smart. We've talked about this, and we will say it again. If you want football, repeat after me, please start wearing a mask.
Yeah, absolutely. Kyle, how do you think the lack of preseason games are going to affect dynasty and fantasy values this year?
It's hard to project players without seeing them on the field. I feel like the preseason really more affects drafts in the later rounds because you get those players that are on the bubble of making a roster, getting opportunities, and that's where they get to make the rosters. So it'll especially affect Dynasty because that's when you really get into deeper leagues where you have, 12 teams with 30 or 35 players on them is when you're getting down to the nitty-gritty in those last 3 or 4 rounds to where you're trying to pick, okay, is this guy even going to make a roster? Is he going to be, the 4th wide receiver on the roster? Or is he just going to be a practice squad guy and have no value for me? So without the preseason games, I feel like it makes it a little tougher in Dynasty. For redraft leagues, I feel like it's kind of neither here nor there other than it's just not giving players the opportunities to, get out and start hitting people.
Yeah, I'm wondering if we should focus a little bit more on returning veterans on teams rather than looking at rookies or new free agents who might not have a time to coalesce with the offense. Maybe look at somebody more like a Kenny Stills, move him higher, and maybe a Brandon Cooks a little bit lower. I was just editing our Houston Texans 2020 preview. All right, so Dak Prescott signed his franchise tender. Do we think a deal's going to be made here, Don?
Yeah, they're probably going to work something out. There's too much mutual interest in both directions for this to happen. Signing the tender was just something that had to happen, but what it does is guarantee a ridiculous cap hit, and the simplest way to mitigate that cap hit and free money for other players and just to manage themselves is to sign Dak long term and then be able to manipulate that contract once you have a framework in place. But right now the cap hit is just ridiculous, and you're going to have key players coming up that need their contracts redone. So the only real way to compensate for that is to just sign him long term and then work with it.
Speaking of Tinder, shout out to Ryan on a big date tonight.
Tender, not Tinder. Yeah.
Eric, you're a big NFC East guy. Do you think Dallas should re-sign Dak to a long-term deal, or they seem to be willing to let him to gamble?
Yeah, I think they're a little crazy for that. I think he's a top 10 quarterback. I'd certainly love to see him walk out the door and leave the division, but ultimately I don't think that they will do that, and they certainly don't think they should do that.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Every day they wait to sign him, I think the price goes up. What was $35 million last year when this was going around is going to be $40 million a year by the time this is all done. Next up, Jets plan on standing pat and letting Jamal Adams' contract ride out. Do we think this is going to lead to a holdout? I'll take this one. Yeah, it will. Shockingly, there was an article by Manish Mehta today that said that Adam Gase is the problem. Wow. Holy, file that under the no shit category. Yeah, he said that.
I'm giving you the eyes right now, like the Adam Gase eyes.
I see them and they scare me.
I can't open them up that well.
Supposedly nobody except Sam Darnold likes Adam Gase. That's the all right, last part. Adrian Peterson said that he plans on playing for 4 more years. Eric, do you think he can whip his body into shape for 4 more seasons?
Oh.
Boo.
Good luck. That's rough. I mean, I'm amazed at Frank Gore still going, and AP's got to hit 2 more years and then 2 more years after that to pull this off. He makes some impressive plays still. AP's just an absolute athletic freak, but he's also a terrible fit for the modern NFL. I don't think he's going to find enough teams that want to, pound the ball out of an I formation over the next 4 years to make that work.
And it's probably not going to be the Redskins, right? They just keep signing and drafting running backs.
Yeah, and he's a weird fit for what they're going to try to do. They talk about, we want versatility out of our running backs, and we want guys who you don't know what's coming and you can move them all around, and AP is the complete opposite of that. So he's already in a tough spot.
Yeah, I was shocked that over the past 2 seasons that he's only been an RB2 or better in 38% of the weeks. That's pretty bad. Mm-hmm. That's pretty bad. But he had a great career, and as we discussed on another podcast, he's definitely going to see the Hall of Fame despite his whipping issues. All right, so tonight we will be reviewing our top 24 Dynasty QBs. Now, at Rider Dynasty, our rankings reflect a 3-year window, which is kind of the Dynasty standard. But that's how we believe Dynasty teams should be built. Now, first up with our consensus number 1 QB, if I'm not mistaken, everybody had him number 1.
Unanimous.
Michael? Yeah. I think this is fairly obvious, and I was the one person who had him at number 2 up to about a month ago, until you guys finally hit me over the head with a great argument. So it's kind of why I wanted to take this one too. Is Patrick Mahomes, right? JJ mentioned that our rankings do reflect a 3-year window. We kind of will say maybe multiple times it might be a little bit of disservice to go looking longer, but Patrick Mahomes, is going to be there longer. Barring obviously an injury, which I think is with any player. Really, what can you say about Patrick Mahomes that hasn't been said before? He won the Super Bowl in his 2nd year, safe as they come in Dynasty leagues, as I said. He does come in with the added aggressiveness, though. That offense runs through him. He gave us a historic QB1 and then a QB8 season. Really, when you look at his projections, if you were to say just like anything about any player, if you were going to say 4,500 yards and probably about 35 TDs for the foreseeable future, just sign me up, right? That's bankable maybe from the next 6 years. Anybody that has watched him and knows football and has played fantasy, where else can you get that security? So Patrick Mahomes, all of our number 1 quarterbacks, easily number 1.
Awesome. Don, do you want to take number 2?
Yeah, 2 we have Lamar Jackson, and this is basically the ironclad lock here going on forward. Dude had 415 fantasy points in quarterback-adjusted leagues. He was basically a quarterback 1 and a running back 2 in one player last year. He put up, unbelievably, 1,200 rushing yards, which is ridiculous, and only on 176 attempts. To put that in perspective, Mark Ingram, the best back on the team, had 200 attempts and only got 1,000 yards. On top of that, Jackson threw for 3,000 and had 36 TDs to 6 interceptions. It's just staggering. Now, how long can the production last? Considering that we're looking at 3-year windows, I think that's pretty safe. If you go on beyond that, though, he's got to learn to not take so many licks and not quite run as much just for wear and tear purposes, because exposing the quarterback to danger is always extra risky, particularly long term.
All right, thanks, Don. Our number 3 quarterback is Dak Prescott.
I'll jump in here back again, if you're hopefully not tired of hearing my voice just yet. Dak gave
Never.
us... Thank you, JJ. I I'm really excited about Dak, the number 2 quarterback, QB2 on the season last year. But he's quietly been a top fantasy quarterback for the past several years. Just to point out and highlight, finishes of QB6, QB10, QB11, and then QB2 in 4 years. A fairly decent swing there, but those are still quarterback 1 numbers. Just a lot of excitement, obviously, in Dallas this year with, the drafting of CeeDee Lamb. Zeke's going to be there. We talked about Dak's long-term prospects. Probably, honestly, the best receiver core in the NFL right now, and I'm not afraid to say that. He's got a coach who ranked in the top 10 in total offensive DVOA 11 out of 13 seasons. Kellen Moore, right, is still the offensive coordinator there. Yep. Aggressive pair with McCarthy. So hopefully you're continuing that continuity on that side. Right, we talked about contract. You can't predict trades, but I really just think that you're paired with a coach that, wants to throw, an aggressive offensive coordinator, and just a really good situation, skill, talent, and opportunity combination. Dak is our number 3 quarterback.
I love Dak Prescott. I've made no bones about that. One of my favorite QBs to draft, especially in a superflex draft right at the end of the first, early second round. Kyle, do you want to go ahead and take our number 4?
Yeah, I'll do it. It's Deshaun Watson. He's entering 2020 as our consensus QB4. The biggest news coming out of Houston this offseason, obviously, was the departure of his favorite target in DeAndre Hopkins in that absolutely mind-boggling trade to Arizona. However, with that trade, there was the addition of David Johnson, who, while he's had a down couple of years, is probably going to be the most competent running back there. They also brought in Brandon Cooks, who's shown that he can be a very good wide receiver with different quarterbacks on different teams and different systems, and they also added Randall Cobb. While there's some questions about those players around him, there's no questioning his abilities as a quarterback. He's carried over the last 2 years a 67.8 completion percentage, which is up there among the tops. He's proven his capability and willingness as a runner. Last season, he was sacked 44 times, though, which sounds high, but when you compare it to 2018, which was a tally of 62, he shaved off 18 sacks. The offensive line improved throughout last year, and they're looking to continue moving in the right direction in 2020. Houston's defense is far from stellar, but so that should give Watson plenty of opportunity to throw the ball, rack up some points. He's a lock for QB1 for me for the next several years to come.
Number 5, we got Kyler Murray coming in, the reigning NFC Rookie of the Year. Duke came in last year and completed 64.4% of his passes, 3,700 yards, a 20-12 TD to INT ratio, and an 87.4 QBR, accounted for 286 fantasy points. And for us, and me in particular, this is all about potential. You now take a quarterback who is already competent in a first year as a rookie, when players tend to add substantially into their second year, and then give him the gift that is a bona fide wide receiver 1 right out the gate, no development needed. In Hopkins, I mean, this is just an opportunity where we have a quarterback-friendly system that wants to throw. We have now a talented wide receiver group around him, and just potential.
Don, any concern that they haven't protected him by getting any offensive linemen?
Yeah, they haven't significantly upgraded the offensive line from last year. There is some concern. He was sacked 40 times last year, which the last thing in the world you want is your young quarterback to get shell-shocked. But it certainly seems like he's immune to the pressure at this point. The expectation would be at some point they're going to have to address that. But now, with the additions at wide receiver, that's where they have left to go. They also have kind of a weakish defense, so we would expect that they would be trailing in enough games that he's going to have enough opportunity to put the ball in the air, try and get those points. So he'll be trying to maintain comeback and get their team going. So for me, it's all potential here.
Number 6 is Russell Wilson. I think compared to the guys we just talked about, the young guns, Russell Wilson's a little bit boring. He's 31. He's a little older. But Russell Wilson, in his entire career, has always finished as a QB1 in fantasy. QB7 last year, QB9 the year before, QB1 in 2017. So he's had the top-end finishes as well. Obviously, Wilson has obviously been boosted by his rushing ability throughout his career, and at the same time limited by his team's tendency to run the ball more than they throw. Well, not more than they throw the ball, but more than many teams throw the ball. And I think moving forward, that's something that we can see kind of offset his rushing as he ages. Wilson has lobbied multiple times to be one of those quarterbacks who gets to drop back 600 times a year. I think Wilson has the pull to make that happen, and he's getting the wide receivers now to make that happen. He has DK Metcalf. He has Tyler Lockett. Those are some exciting downfield options. And on top of that, that defense, that vaunted Seattle defense, has gradually been aging out over the years. Sherman's been gone for a couple of years. KJ Wright's getting a lot older. Bobby Wagner's getting a lot older. Davian Clowney's out the door. So kind of like you said, Don, with Arizona, that Seattle defense is starting to lean in the direction of just letting Wilson air it out more and more each year.
Now, I don't know if anybody else noticed this. I think it's actually the first time I've seen this in 20 years of playing football. But the top 6 quarterbacks in our ranking are African American. I don't remember that ever happening. I think it's a great thing for the diversity of the league. But I just wanted to point that out. I think it's great. I don't know. Any thoughts?
No,
you
I
guys
mean,
have been watching football as long as I have.
Yeah, it's a good observation, and I would just say it's purely talent for people that deserve to be there.
Yeah, I would absolutely agree with that, and I think you're seeing the trend mirrored at the Division I big school college level, where you're starting to see more and more African American quarterbacks getting prominent roles at prominent institutions.
Awesome. Sorry for that aside. Kyle, go ahead. Why don't you take the next?
Yeah, no apologies needed on that, man. It's a fantastic point. I think diversity is a beautiful thing about the country we live in, and our country's favorite sport should represent that as well.
Absolutely.
Our number 7 quarterback on the board is Carson Wentz, the North Dakota State pride of North Dakota. I'm going to start off with a quick personal note on him. I hate, as somebody who does injury analysis and likes to talk about injuries, I hate the term injury prone, and Wentz often gets that label, which I feel like is kind of unfair because a lot of his injuries are tough luck injuries. One of my favorite Twitter follows, Dr. Edwin Porras, at FBInjuryDoc. Give him a follow. Tweets out very insightful fantasy injury news as well as actual football knowledge. He pointed out he's had several fractures. He had a wrist fracture, a rib fracture, and a back fracture, all before passing the age of 25. Your bone density matures after you turn 25. So a lot of that stuff is just like he's a young guy doing, playing a tough sport. One of them, he had a 4-wheeling accident, broke his wrist. So, tough luck injuries. He tore his ACL a couple years ago. It was a contact ACL tear. 72% of ACL tears are non-contact. The quarterback position in the NFL has a rate of ACL tears at 2.5%. That's not a high percentage of that injury happening. Concussion happened on a cheap shot. Nothing you can do about that. All of these injuries are, as I said, it's tough luck. Stuff happens. It's unfortunate, but he's healed from all of them. It's no longer slowing him down. And with that, I had to get it off my chest. It's an unfortunate label that often overshadows the truth that he is a phenomenal talent. Last season, he went into the season without all of his starting wide receivers with the exception of Nelson Aguilar, who we all know isn't necessarily elite. He still managed to throw for over 4,000 yards and had 27 touchdowns. In this offseason, the Eagles rewarded him. They invested in the passing game by drafting 3 wide receivers and trading for veteran Marquise Goodwin. These additions obviously should improve his weekly floor. The speed of players like Goodwin and rookie Jalen Reagor coming in should spell big play opportunities for him, which is an added benefit if you play in leagues that rewards for long touchdown passes.
Yeah, excellent point. Coming in at number 8 is Matthew Stafford, and if I may, I'll take this one. He's the QB for the Detroit Lions. He's coming off a lost 2019 season due to a broken bone in his back. Now, this was an injury that hampered him down the stretch in 2018, but that he thought he was able to endure with some, off-season rehab. Fortunately, he wasn't able to and missed most of the year. However, Stafford started the year on fire, registering as a QB6. He averaged 26.8 points per game over the first 9 weeks. Looking at that average over the full year, he would have been the QB3 had he played the full season. He is back and healthy with some new offensive linemen to keep him upright and a shiny new toy in the backfield by the name of DeAndre Swift. At only 32, I look forward to at least 4 to 5 more good years from Stafford. Michael, who's next?
All right, so we are looking at number 9 right now, and our number 9 consensus quarterback is Aaron Rodgers. I don't know if that's a little bit surprising or not. Not a ton of feedback on Twitter from people about Aaron Rodgers, surprisingly. I think he kind of gets a little bit of a bad rap. His deep ball didn't look the same as always. Devontae Adams went down. The surrounding talent wasn't super exciting. You saw Alan Lazard step up in times. MVS kind of disappeared. He's in a LaFleur offense that, preferred to feature the running back here. And that's no surprise, given his pedigree with Shanahan. I don't necessarily see a reason for that to change. He did attempt near 600 passes in 2018. That was the second highest total of his career through a knee injury. Only 25 TD passes then, his lowest over a full season. Then last year, another kind of quote-unquote down year, but he finished still as the QB 10. And while you cannot assume, even though there might be some writing on the wall with the drafting of Jordan Love, it does kind of feel like the franchise is trying to move on, right? So with quarterbacks playing in their 40s and us looking at a 3-year window as a reminder, I don't feel like it's necessarily bad to keep him in our top 10, even if he's with the Packers or another team, right? This group still sees him as a QB1 over the past, or like in the past, or in the next 3 years, excuse me. And when he plays a full slate, he's given us a QB1 finish. So until he doesn't, I'm really struggling to fade him that much.
Yeah, it's hard to argue with that.
It's almost, I hate to, I will say this quite often, but I want to, if someone keeps showing you who they are, I'm going to believe it until they don't. And while he's had some struggles, the numbers are still there.
Yeah, I love young quarterbacks, and I tend to try to fade the older QBs. And guys like Matt Ryan, guys like Aaron Rodgers kind of come back and kick me in the ass every year because they keep showing up and they keep performing at a QB1 level, no matter how often I say they're going to get bumped out. So, yeah, great points. Great points. Kyle.
Well, you made a great point in bringing up Matt Ryan and his consistency, because at number 10, we have Matt Ryan. If Carson Wentz is injury prone, Matt Ryan is injury retardant. He has played in all but 3 games in his career. In 2009, he had turf toe and missed 2 games, and he missed 1 game last year with an ankle injury. He's amassed over 4,000 yards in almost every single season that he has played in the league. Every year since 2011, he has surpassed 4,000 passing yards. He's not going to give you much on the ground. He's not a great runner, but I expect his 2019 touchdown total of 26 to improve. He's got great weapons at his disposal. He has Julio Jones and Calvin Ridley on the outside, and they added Hayden Hurst and Todd Gurley this offseason. Todd Gurley's a great pass-catching back. He can do it all and definitely open it up in the run game to help Ryan in the passing game. He has 3 more seasons left on his current contract. Although he is 35 years old, he would fall into that older quarterback category. I wouldn't draft him early on in dynasty leagues, expecting him to, expecting your team to be set for the next 10 years with him. But he's a great mid to late round veteran that that you can plug in, and he's pretty much matchup proof. And one last note on his consistency. According to Fantasy Pros, a bust week qualifies as one in which a quarterback scores less than 14 points in any given week. There was only one QB last year who had a bust rate lower than Matt Ryan last season, and that was league MVP Lamar Jackson.
That's a saucy little tidbit.
I saw that this afternoon reading about him, and I was like, I got to throw that in there.
Yeah, I love the idea of drafting a veteran to, especially in super flex leagues, to follow up like a young QB, just to kind of even it out, pick a young and an old and you're good to go. Now, speaking of young QBs, at number 11, we have Joe Burrow. Now, personally, I am the lowest of our crew on Joe Burrow, ranking him at 16 overall, which I thought was being very generous. I guess I was wrong. I am not quite sure who Joe Burrow is going to be as a pro. Will he be the QB who transferred out of Ohio State and had an okay 2018 at LSU? Or is he going to be the quarterback he was with Joe Brady, where the entire offense set records? We don't know. We don't know which one he is, if 2019 was a fluke. He will definitely be playing with less of a talent disparity than he had at LSU, with an offensive line that still needs help. You could convince me that his weapons at LSU were better than what he's going to have in Cincinnati. But I think Joe Burrow is going to be, at the minimum, a very good QB. But it's going to take a few years until we quite find out if he's going to be worth a QB1 ranking, in my opinion.
Interesting. Yeah, there's a lot of love. There's a lot of love for Joe Burrow, especially when, the majority of us do Superflex leagues. And in rookie drafts, he was the consensus number one pick. It's hard not to get excited about that. I would probably, just to answer really quickly your suggestion about players at LSU, I still would pick Mixon over CEH. I would still probably take a healthy AJ Green in 1 year over a Justin Jefferson. I need to see Jamar Chase on a football field. I like Tyler Boyd too, so he's going to have a lot of fun weapons. It's all about how can he tie it together. And he's not a 1 year wonder. We know his athletic profile, but he is certainly an exciting prospect, and for us to have him at number 11, I think says something.
I know I would definitely want Joe Mixon, AJ Green, Tyler Boyd, but it's not as it's close. It's close,
yeah,
right? No, it's a close discussion.
Oh, absolutely. I probably should have given you more credit there, but yes, it is definitely close, especially with how dominant a team LSU was.
Yeah, and just bear in mind that the best of the LSU receivers is still at LSU.
Right. So two things. We're getting to the point of the podcast where we've got a little bit more exciting game time, and hopefully, JJ, maybe that if you're not judge, jury, and executioner, I might have a shot at winning one of these once upon a dream. So we're going to do two things, but really quickly, before we get to our disparity debates, I want to just hit each one of you really quickly with, in 5 seconds or less, we just kind of hit, our top 10, which is what we put, on Twitter with Joe Burrow at 11. We got some pretty good feedback on Twitter with those top 10. So I'm just going to come to you really quickly. You don't have to explain because we'll touch some quarterbacks later here in this podcast. But I'd love to know maybe where you think that the consensus got it wrong. So I'm just going to ask you, who do you think should have been in the top 10 that wasn't? So, JJ, I'm going to come to you, and we're going to go lightning round, so just real quick. JJ, who do we miss?
Josh Allen.
Josh Allen. Kyle, who did we miss?
I'm going to have to go with Josh Allen as well.
Eric, what are you thinking?
I'm bumping Burrow up into the top 10.
Okay. And Don, who you got?
Yeah, I'm bumping Burrow up as well. I'd like him in the top 10.
Well, we had some Josh Allens. We had some Burrows. Number 12 is Josh Allen. It's our first disparity debate, as we talked about. Remember, at Rider Dynasty, we make outliers explain their position. Then we judge kind of who made the better argument. So JJ and Eric are going to talk about Josh Allen coming in at number 12. JJ, you had him ranked at 8, as you say. Eric, you had Josh Allen ranked at number 17. I would love to hear actually from Eric first, why that you had Josh Allen at 17's, again, not a terrible ranking, but just explain your position.
Sure. So Josh Allen obviously was a pretty usable fantasy quarterback last season, ended up coming in as a low QB1. He ran the ball a decent amount, especially down near the goal line, which added a lot of value. My issue with Allen is that sort of production is not super hard to find, including among quarterbacks that we haven't gotten to yet. So you have your Kirk Cousinses, your Jared Goffs, a few guys we mentioned already, but that are kind of unexciting options that can hit that floor. The other issue with Josh Allen is, at the end of the day, to be a long-term dynasty quarterback with value, you have to be a starting NFL quarterback. And I don't have a ton of confidence that Josh Allen is still a starter 4 or 5 years from now. And I know we talk about 3-year rankings, but 3 years from now, is Josh Allen going to look like, the next Peyton Manning? That's bold, but no. But, or is he going to look...
Sustainability.
Right. Or is he going to look like Blake Bortles did at the end of his first contract with the Jaguars? And I think that's who I keep coming back to, is Blake Bortles had a lot of production early in his career, but he wasn't necessarily a good quarterback. It was kind of volume driven. With Allen, it's rushing volume driven. At at the end of the day, his actual quarterback efficiency statistics are not particularly good. He has a lot of work to do as a passer, as a decision maker, with his accuracy. And ultimately, that's going to drive how much value he can add to your team. So in the short term, his production can't miss. And in the long term, I'm scared he's just not a long-term NFL quarterback still.
JJ, what do you think?
In no way am I endorsing Josh Allen as a good quarterback. I repeat, in no way am I endorsing Josh Allen as a good quarterback. Now, I do not believe that he is even remotely good. I do not think that he will be the QB in Buffalo in 3 years. However, he scores points as a running QB. Last year, he finished as QB 6, and they added more weapons around him. Since returning from injury in week 12 of his rookie year, Allen has been a QB1 57% of the time, and a QB2 33% of the time. Now, I'm happy with a high-end QB2 as his floor, and a ceiling of a top 3 quarterback every week. Listen, we don't have to like him. But the fact remains is he scores points. The team went to the playoffs. He at least has 2 years left where he's going to play in Buffalo. And then somebody's going to sign him to play. So I don't think we have to worry about him starting for the next 3 years. The only thing that can slow him down is injury.
That's a fair point. To jump in there, I understand why Bills fans get so defensive about Josh Allen. He's their precious franchise quarterback, and the guy who was supposed to defend him just completely threw him under the bus as a quarterback and defended him as a fantasy asset. So that's rough, Buffalo.
Yeah, hey, these are Dynasty rankings, not my favorite QB rankings.
Right.
No argument.
Very important note.
Yeah, I don't know that I'm the one that's supposed to kind of rule in favor. I have him ranked as he's my 12th Dynasty quarterback, so I think that he'd just be closer to a little bit better and banking on the running fantasy points than hanging back too far.
I'm hurt.
Like we said, we're going to have a lot more of these debates in the second half because our rankings really diverged. Actually, one of our largest disparities and our second disparity debate is about the man in Cleveland, Baker Mayfield. Klaus has him ranked at number 7.
Thanks for laughing through that.
No, I'm not laughing at you. I just find it funny that you have him ranked at 7 and Kyle has him ranked as a tight end. Like he's at 17. He's barely a QB according to Kyle.
19.
19. Sorry. So I'm going to let Kyle go first.
All right, Baker baby, or not. I have him ranked lowest out of all of our rankers, obviously. Here's why. A lot of people were in love with Baker for his college performance. He won the Heisman. He was great at Oklahoma, all that. But you have to consider very different situations. At Oklahoma, he was playing against weak defenses, made a ton of highlight reel plays. His plays broke down. He finds the open receiver that's scrambling to get open. In the NFL, defenders are not only way more talented and faster, they're a lot smarter than the competition at Oklahoma. Just because your first read isn't open doesn't mean you can just roll out and improvise in this league. You got to make something happen. You got to be smart. You got to be decisive. Check down when you need to. Get rid of the ball. His Dynasty Superflex ADP I was reading earlier, it's in the high 40s, which I was surprised about. Some other notable players in that range: Allen Robinson, Austin Eckler, DJ Chark, Calvin Ridley. I'd rather have any of those guys on my team every day and twice on Sunday before I took Baker there. Wait till the next round. You can get somebody like Tua or Daniel Jones, who I feel a lot better about having on my team. Browns came into 2019 as the offseason champs. They added a ton of offensive weapons around Baker. They tried to make the team, perfect for him. And what did he do? He proceeded to get worse. Our consensus has him at QB 13, but outside of Ryan and myself, everybody else has him ranked as a QB 1. He is not a QB 1 in my book. I stand by that evaluation. A lot of people are expecting him to have a bounce back this season. The only thing he's ever produced in this league has been mediocre. In 2018, he was QB 16. Last year, even after gaining Odell Beckham Jr., one of the best receivers in the league, and Kareem Hunt, he regressed and was QB 19. If a 2020 bounce back is rising back up to QB 16, I'm going to take my chances on somebody else in his range.
Klaus, I'm going to give you a shot. Go ahead.
It was, and no, so like that is great information. So if I'm talking to you and we're having a conversation about how I'm supposed to convince you one way or the other, or convince our writers, I am putting the blame solely on Baker and Freddie Kitchens, right? Mm-hmm. You have a quarterback that has a bad offensive line, that you roll him out on deep passes and try to throw deep passes with no protection. That is a play calling error, okay? And you have to atone for that. No problem whatsoever. Enter Kevin Stefanski this year, right? 2019 wasn't super prolific for Kirk Cousins, but it was Cousins' best year in a lot of statistical categories: career marks and touchdown percentage, interception percentage, quarterback rating, which was 107, adjusted air yards per attempt. That's a cool stat, but does anybody really sit there and go, "Ooh, I'm going to make my point on adjusted air yards per attempt"? I'm looking for really Stefanski to implement a system with, like I said, an improved offensive line. You're looking at they drafted Jedrick Wills, and they also signed Jack Conklin, who had statistically the best career year of his career there. Then you look at the offensive scheme that they ran with Minnesota, and they did have a lot of play action. Okay, right? Give him more time and space to actually throw when he has it, and he can be accurate when he does have that play action. That scheme, again, run by Shanahan, tremendous production with Garoppolo, Cousins. I think Mayfield makes the jump for that reason. He does have the weapons. His 2019 stats actually do tell an interesting story, because in play action, he completed 66, almost 67% of his passes with 11 touchdowns, 6 interceptions, and 102 quarterback rating. But in no play action, he only completed about 50% of his passes with 11 touchdowns, 15 INTs. He's being hurried, and a 68.8 quarterback rating. You implement a different system with a different coach that actually cares about what play you're running, and I do see a jump in his production.
I am torn at this point, because there really is no winner in a disparity debate.
Right.
And I am supposed to be King Solomon-ish, King Solomon-esque, and be fair. So as much as the devil on my shoulder is telling me to make fun of Klaus, I have to say I am excited for Kevin Stefanski to come in there, get rid of that Freddie Kitchens bull pucky, get down to a 2 wide receiver, 2 tight end, 1 running back set, run the goddamn ball, throw play action,
feed Nick Chubb,
and take away the options for Baker. The less options he has, the better. I think Stefanski's going to give that to him. I don't know if I would go as high as 7, because I'm not high, but I definitely wouldn't have him as 19. I have him as borderline QB1. However, Kyle, if he doesn't do it this year, he's done.
Yeah, and might I point out, Minnesota was the 4th heaviest run or rush percentage team last year. I mean, you have Kareem Hunt and Nick Chubb there in Cleveland. They're going to run the ball a lot, which will help that play action, as you pointed out. Those are fantastic points, but I worry about opportunity when you look at that too.
Yeah, here we go. 14. Daniel Jones coming in. Dude had 215 fantasy points last year, but only played 13 games. In those 13 games, he had 3,000 yards passing and a 62% completion percentage. 24 to 12 TD to INT ratio, almost 300 rushing yards thrown on top. That's never going to be a huge staple in his game. And about an 88% or 88 QBR. Okay, that's fine. Here's where it gets better in Daniel Jones's world. The Giants took 3 of their first 5 draft choices and invested that in offensive linemen to go with a Nate Solder that they already had in place. One of those was their first pick, which was 4th overall, getting Thomas from UGA. Their 3rd-round pick was another tackle, who will be on the right side, in Pete, and then a guard, Lemieux from Oregon. as much as we wonder about the overall effect here, the offensive line disparities from what they were to what they can be now is going to be dynamic. Throw in a healthy Saquon, an effective running game, and now full seasons out of 3 relatively effective wide receivers and a very good tight end in Evan Ingram, and we have a lot of potential for a quarterback that already had 2 game-winning drives and a comeback win last year. So, dude's got a lot of upside. Slayton is a high-end potential here at the wide receiver position. I think there's a lot to possibly like. And the kid is 22 years old, going to be 23 by the start of the season, so very young, which factors into the dynasty land. So there's a lot to like with Jones.
Ryan wishes he was here for this one. Klaus, take it for him.
We're going to talk about Tua, and you won't catch me dead trying to
Tua
pronounce
who?
his last name.
Who?
You know who I'm talking about, right? Yeah. You know what? I just said you're not going to catch me dead, and now I'm going to try. What is it? Tagovailoa?
Tagovailoa.
Okay. Well, thank you for encouraging me, people.
You're welcome.
All right.
We
So
should have practiced.
this is an interesting spot, I think, for Tua, because you're going to talk about injury, right? High marks in athleticism, accuracy, instincts, pocket presence, things that people have loved about him coming out. I know that there are people that are worried about his hip. I was drawn to a 71% completion rate in that injury-shortened junior year at Alabama. I do love the mobility. I think he's, a gunslinger. I think in past pods, the natural comp is Russell Wilson, but I see more of a Drew Brees. He does have a great deep ball for a rookie quarterback. To me, I will say, I'm not going to break any barriers here by saying that he's steady and extremely trustworthy, I think. If you want to look at the hip, I think that we're going to know right off the bat. Anyone that is anyone in dynasty leagues that's coming in that would need an opportunity at a quarterback in a rookie draft, if it's a super flex league, you're taking the shot because you've got a very high pick at a quarterback that's valuable, right? So I don't blame anyone for taking, but I honestly don't know how this is going to pan out. I am trying to be optimistic here. I think he's a big part of future planning, and I think that 15 is a pretty good statement for all of us to be able to go in and say we're willing to take the risk on his athleticism. And injuries might happen, but let's roll him out to a Miami team that is starving now for wins, and maybe he is the final piece of that pie that can help them on that path, especially in a division that could be up for grabs.
All right, number 16, Don.
Here we go, Kirk Cousins in Minnesota. A 31-year-old quarterback now. If you're thinking now this should be your second quarterback or you're coming back around, dude had 249 fantasy points last year, 26 TDs to 6 INTs, which was really good, 3,600 yards. Here's where things start to come off the rails, though. Yes, they did add a first-round wide receiver, which often doesn't get you much in his first year, despite who I tend to draft. He completed 69% of his passes last year, which is fine, but here's now where it goes off the rails. Stephon Diggs is gone. A substantial part of their offense and something they didn't do much to replace because Jefferson and Diggs are not the same guy. They don't do the same kind of things. They're different styles of wide receiver. Whereas Diggs taking the deep ball and working down the field more, Jefferson's more come out of the slot and be more effective in the short to intermediate game. The bigger worry here is, though, the total lack of attempts. In 2018, Cousins had 600 attempts. Last year, 444 attempts. The team is strongly favoring the run. And with a running back like Dalvin Cook and an effective backup...
Madison?
Yeah, that guy. Dude can play. The point is, this is going to be a running team now. You're not going to get the volume that you would want to try and get the big numbers. So, for me, Cousins is fading back now. So, 16's about right.
All right, so that was Kirk Cousins at 16. Our next disparity debate, these are fun, is about Drew Lock. M-I-Z, baby. Don has him ranked at 13.
Love him.
JJ, you are at 22. And since, Don, you've got just the enthusiasm coming off, I want to hear from you first.
All right, let's talk weapons now. Cortland Sutton is an absolute wide receiver. Dude's a beast. Throw in Jerry Jeudy, who's probably the most pro-ready wide receiver out of the draft class, and a KJ Hamler in there who can stretch the field. Now 2 capable tight ends, including a breakout player in Fant this year, 2 solid running backs in Gordon and Lindsey, and an offense that's just ready to roll. In a relatively weak defensive division, a team that is going to need to score some points, Locke's going to be putting it in the air early and often. Dude had, in relatively limited starts, had 5 starts by the end of the last year, and that was after Sanders was already gone. Had 64% completion, 1,000 yards passing, 2 game-winning drives, was a 7-3 TD and INT. He's got the tools and got the talent. Now we'll see if they can build on that offense. And now, again, we're talking Dynasty, so 3-year windows. That offense is primed to be substantial for a couple of years in a row now.
Yikes.
Uh-oh.
Well, that was wrong.
What's coming? Yeah, what's coming?
Oh,
But, I mean, honestly, I get it. This is a shiny new toy ranking by the Rider Dynasty crew. Like, oh, shiny new toys. Everybody rank them high. We look at the draft, the new players, we get excited, and poof, Locke becomes our 17th ranked QB. Well, unfortunately, this is the day after the Christmas. Both of the legs of your new GoBot have broken off. Your friend got the Transformer, and you're mad and jealous.
Robots. You are showing your age, my friend.
The batteries showed up dead, huh?
But Locke played in 5 games to finish 2019. Except for Kansas City, the passing defenses he faced ranked 20th, 26th, 29th, and 30th. In those weeks, he was the QB 24. Yes, that's right. Against the worst of the worst, he was barely a QB 2. So what are we basing this ranking on? Right? We're happy he got new toys. I have him ranked at 22. After working on this debate, I actually want to move him down. So I don't think he's going to be the QB in 3 years. I think he's going to be out before Josh Allen is out. So, no dice.
I want to really quickly go to Kyle, because Kyle has him at 15, just to see if your opinion was changed at all in that disparity debate. I'd love you to be able to be the one to talk about that.
I wouldn't say that my opinion was necessarily changed on Drew Lock. I think he's very young, obviously. He's only, as JJ pointed out, only started 5 games, so that's a very small sample size to try to make a long-term judgment on somebody. If we want to extrapolate it, make it a longer sample size, he set the SEC record for touchdowns in the season in 2017. Like, the kid's got the talent. It's just a matter of having the opportunity. So I'm interested to see what he does this year. JJ definitely opened my eyes to what's going on around him in that system, to see what he was talking about with Noah Fant. I thought was very interesting, talking about Albert O as a replacement, but that's a different conversation. To pick one, as you guys said earlier, it's hard to pick one. I think JJ was saying the devil on his shoulder said it's hard to pick one guy. JJ's urging me to pick him. I'm a Drew Lock truther, though. I told you on the first pod I was on here I wouldn't accept any trash talk about Drew Lock, so I got to go with Don here.
That's right.
And there it is. JJ, make yourself feel a little bit better talking about your boy at number 18.
Before we get to that, let us all take a moment of silence for JJ's first loss of any game on the pod.
First of all, this pod has not been edited. I will voice over what you just said and replace it.
You can just hear me really soft in the background mumbling, and it's just JJ talking over it with the We Are the Champions playing.
You don't screw with people that make your food, and you don't screw with the editor of the podcast.
Guys, listen, I am happy to lose. Losing actually drives me to try to win even more. And speaking about trying to win even more, our 18th ranked QB is Sam Darnold. Now, hope springs eternal for this Jets fan. I hope Adam Gase gets fired. I hope Darnold gets some protection from the new offensive line. I hope that the addition of Perriman and Mims, along with the return of the future number 5 tight end, Chris Herndon, can give Sam some reliable targets. Darnold, despite the team around him, has finished as a QB2 or better in 77% of his games. So QB2 is his floor, right? He's got to be QB24 or higher. Now, I hope it gets better. Gase should be gone by the end of this year. But before I lose the little hope I have, I hope Sam Darnold can survive this.
All right, at 19, I've got Jared Goff. Well, I should say at 19, we've got Jared Goff. I've actually got him as my number 15 quarterback. He was...
What?
Yeah, I know. Nobody talks about Jared Goff, but
Nope.
he was just barely outside the QB1 ranks at QB 13 last season. He was a QB1 2 years prior to that. He still is young. He turns 26 in October. And I don't really get what there is to not like. He's not exciting. He's not, Lamar Jackson. He doesn't have the rushing upside. But what's wrong with him? Why does everybody hate him? I think it's because people think Sean McVay is the only reason he succeeds. But even if that's the case, I don't really know that that's a bad thing. Goff and the Rams are 33-14 since 2016 when Sean McVay became the coach. They went to a Super Bowl. Sean McVay's a great coach. I don't think he's going anywhere. So if Goff is tied to McVay for the next 5 years and turning in consistent low-end QB1 seasons, I just don't see the problem with that. And I think there's also a lot of development that happens when you have quarterbacks in these stable systems where, Goff was an absolute disaster year one. Everything was getting thrown at him. But now he's kind of got that chance to develop. And I think, there's more development that can happen between now and age 31 than we kind of give credit to quarterbacks where, maybe 5 years from now he can carry a team.
Mm-hmm. No, to kind of answer that question, too, is he's gotten a rap of not being able to read past his first read or read defenses at all. There was an article, I want to say, that got leaked that said, during the Super Bowl against the Patriots, the Patriots waited until 15 seconds when their, your headset got turned off, and they threw everything at him, and he couldn't read it, and he struggled during the season. That being said, you're right. Tons of development, tons of potential there. I'm excited to watch him and see if he can, fix those issues, because it's not a talent. It's not an arm talent issue. It's not a athleticism issue. It's something that is correctable.
Yeah, Goff has fun to say wide receiver Cooper Kupp, and we're all doing it wrong. We have to say, by law, offensive genius Sean McVay. Every time you say it.
Offensive genius Sean McVay.
Trademark.
All right, there it is. TM, right at the end.
John just got himself a trademark.
Boom!
Congratulations.
Love it. All right, the next disparity debate is about Ryan Tannehill. Klaus has him ranked at 15, and JJ has him at 25. Gentlemen, JJ, let's hear it.
I have him ranked as 25, as Don said, which is based on the next 3 years. So let's take a peek at Mr. Tannehill. Now, last year, Mr. Tannehill faced 7 bottom 16 defenses, including 6 ranked 20th or worse. Tannehill had a 5-2 record in these games. He averaged 25.9, 26 fantasy points per game, with 278.9 yards per game passing. According to RotoViz, he averaged 10.3 points above expectation in those games. That's awesome. However, he faced 4 top 16 defenses last year. Tannehill's record was 2-2. He averaged 19.1 fantasy points per game, with 197.5 yards per game passing. According to RotoViz, that was only 6.2 points above expectation, a change of negative 4.1. That's 7 fantasy points less per game, 80 yards less, and a 500 record. Now, that is what a good game manager is supposed to do in the NFL. You win against bad teams, and break even against the good teams. Everybody always talks about how the best teams, they're not so good because they only went 500 against teams who made the playoffs. That's what you're supposed to do, right? That's a successful season. Bad news. In 2020, he plays against 7 teams ranked in the top 16 in DVOA, according to Football Outsiders 2020. It's going to drive his numbers down. Do I not believe in him? I like him. I like Tannehill. I used to have him on a lot of rosters. He's a decent QB, but he is not going to be their starter for the next 3 years. He's not. They're going to have to look elsewhere because Derrick Henry is not going to be able to shoulder the load.
I think all good points, and I actually, like in looking at kind of our rankings, where I have him at 15, I want to make sure that, A, I'm not copping out of this disparity debate, but B, 15 is a high-end QB2, which is, what we saw from him from week 7 to 17 last year, right? Averaged about 250 yards, passing yards, and 2 passing scores per game, while also, using his legs. It was adding 4 touchdowns on the ground, 10th most rushing yards as a QB during that time. That was week 7 through 17. But let's make sure that we understand that we're coming at this disparity debate as an argument saying we understand Tannehill's not elite, right? I do think that he is good as far as prospects, and he's ranked where he is because I literally believe that he's on a team and a system that is favorable offense for his skill set, the benefit of throwing the ball to, again, A.J. Brown, who a lot of people are very high on. It's got to get him the ball. Jonnu Smith, a lot of people on their sleeper or top 10 tight ends. I kind of think Corey Davis is a lost cause, but not exactly the most exciting weapons in the world other than your number 1 wide receiver. JJ is right. Derrick Henry might not be there forever, especially with any contract disputes. And, it just really, that could be like the hardest thing with fantasy stock is you really have to rely on all the pieces being there. I don't know that he's going to have a stellar full fantasy season. During those 12 weeks that we were talking about, he was like 4th among fantasy quarterbacks, and only Lamar Jackson averaged more fantasy points per game. But the reason I'm in there is because I believe in that system, and I like him where he is now, and at least for the next 2 to 3 years, and that's why I have him at 15.
You know what, Michael? I'm not going to let Don judge this. I'm going to judge it myself. I am taking the control.
Say, I won.
You won this, Michael. You actually moved me. Like, I actually had a tear going down my face. And I don't think it was Da Bomb hot sauce this time.
Yeah, how is your bum?
Not doing well. No, I'm just kidding. It recovered like 2 days later. I agree with you. And I actually think Corey Davis is in for a resurgence. I'd be picking Corey Davis up in late rounds. I believe in Corey Davis.
He'll be there. Well, it's interesting, as we keep, getting further down the list, right? You're starting to stacking players that you want to make an argument for, but at the same time, it's like they're at their rank for a reason. So our last debate is Jimmy Garoppolo. JJ has him ranked number 12 overall. Kyle has him all the way at twice that, at 24. Kyle, let me hear you talk about Jimmy G.
I'm closer to the consensus here, so I don't feel that I necessarily need to defend my position as much as JJ's going to have to try to convince folks, but I just want to try to provide facts on it. My first concern for Jimmy G, and with any fantasy player, is opportunity. We always want to look at opportunity. What's their ceiling going to be? The 49er scheme is to run first, and it works. In the South, we say if it ain't broke, don't fix it. They beefed up the O-line. They added one of the best tackles in the game by trading for Trent Williams during the draft. Obviously, they had to replace Joe Staley, who's been a staple there, but who better to do it with? Jimmy G was 19th in the league in attempts last season, so he's obviously not way up there throwing the ball a lot. And the 49ers were the second run-heaviest team of the league, so I just don't see the opportunity there for him to be a QB1, as JJ's suggesting he should be. Scott Zolak, who's a color commentator for the New England Patriots, said that Jimmy Garoppolo was one of the worst practice QBs they've ever had. And it's rumored that that's probably what led to his trade out of New England. Obviously, if you have bad practice habits, you're not going to improve. After not having a stellar year last year, and it was his first full season as a starter, it's tough to build off of that. Also, excluding George Kittle, he lost his second and his fourth leading receivers in Sanders and Goodwin this year. They're more likely going to start the season without Deebo Samuel because of his foot injury. Yes, I know we're looking at 3 years out, but that still affects one of these years. They added Brandon Ayuk in the draft. He should be good, but more often than not, rookie receivers take a couple of years to get going. And he finished 2019 as the QB 14, but there were several guys that were injured that finished below him last year that I expect will outpace his numbers, and at least in the next year, if not the next 2 or 3. Some of those names: Drew Brees, Matthew Stafford, Daniel Jones, Sam Darnold. We've already talked about all of those guys before him, with the exclusion of Brees. However, Brees was hurt part of the year last year. I would expect him with a better offense this year to do better than him. And I wouldn't be surprised if you see guys like Drew Lock and Jared Goff to outpace him as well, because their teams like to throw the ball and they're getting that opportunity.
All right, I guess that's my turn.
Yeah, you're in a lot of disparity debates, JJ.
I'm in all of them. Sometimes I'm really behind. Like, I have guys ranked low and sometimes high. I can't get it right according to you guys. I have Jimmy G ranked as my QB 12. Why? Let's talk. Jimmy G finished last year as the QB 14. So this run-heavy team, this team that's not going to give him any opportunity to pass the ball, well, he came in QB 14 last year doing that and made it to the Super Bowl. He appeared in every game after suffering a torn ACL in Week 3 of 2018. And as our very own Nick Weir pointed out in his recent article, QBs take a step forward the second year after an ACL injury. Well, this is that year. They lost Manny Sanders, all right, but they drafted Brandon Ayuk in the first. They get back 2019 third-round wide receiver Jalen Hurd, 6'4", 227. That's a lot of man, right? They added Trent Williams to bolster their offensive line. Last year, their offensive line was 8th in run blocking and 15th in pass blocking. A modest improvement in numbers will have Jimmy G securely as a QB1 next year. I don't know why we're all dropping him down to 21. That's dropping him 7 spots from where he finished last year. And everything about him got better.
That's a good point. Don, you want to jump in on this one?
Yeah. The replacement of Trent Williams in there for Staley is kind of a wash to me, because Staley came out at a high level and kind of walked away at the top before the wheels completely fell off of that. So I'm looking at replacement. Bear in mind that Williams didn't play last year either, so he's coming into a system that he should fit, but it's not like he's ready to go. So there's going to be some growing pains. Really, I think the problem is now you're trying to integrate new receivers into that system, and particularly in this year, I just don't like that mix. And the guy we all thought was going to take the huge step forward, and Deebo, is now hurt with a foot injury and will realistically miss a couple of weeks. So that's going to set back an offense. He can be solid, but I just don't have him that high.
So because Deebo's missing possibly 2 weeks max, we're setting him back for 3 years.
No. Would you like to keep on in the interest of time, or do you want to keep going about Jimmy G?
I would just like to, I don't understand this. I would like your voice of reason.
Yeah, I have him a little bit later as some of the quarterbacks that we've already mentioned. I do like higher. I think it's hard to push forth that you're going to have your rushing percentage be so high on a team and have him dependent. We saw him light up the scoreboard in the New Orleans game, so we absolutely know what he is capable of. He was, as you say, right, like on the borderline of a QB1. So we know he can do that. And if I'm sticking to my guns, I do understand that. Why are we dropping him so low? I think JJ puts together a pretty good point there.
I love you.
Now, let's keep moving, because I know Eric was excited to talk about Dwayne Haskins. All
right. In the interest of time, I'll try and keep this quick and give you guys a 2-for-1. with the next two QBs in our rankings. At 22, we have Dwayne Haskins. At 23, we have Gardner Minshew. They're bunched together here in our group rankings, and they're also bunched together in my rankings. I think they're very similar options, despite the wide difference in how they came into the league, with Minshew being a 6th-round pick and Haskins a 1st-round pick. My issue with both is obviously that there's just a lot of risk, similar to Josh Allen, that, they're not starting quarterbacks 3 years from now. Haskins had a very rough rookie season. Minshew, draft capital is one of my biggest determiners in dynasty values, and Minshew just doesn't have it. The Jaguars will move on from him in a heartbeat if he falters. That said, he had a very encouraging rookie season. He had 3,200 yards, which is the most all-time by a 6th-rounder. And he finished as a QB 18 in only 14 games. So not a bad start. The Jaguars did add Laviska Shenault. I wouldn't bet on it, but there's franchise QB potential there that he could get a long-term deal. Haskins was thrown into an absolutely abysmal scenario. Jay Gruden did not want Haskins. That was widely known to be a Dan Snyder pick. And I don't think Haskins got the development and the coaching that he really needed from Gruden. And then when Gruden was ultimately fired, Bill Callahan came in and implemented an offense that was like last seen in the 18th century. So there was just absolutely nothing for Haskins to do. As the season went on, he did do better. Kevin O'Connell started to run the offense a little more and things looked better. And as bad as Haskins was, because he was really, really, really bad in his first couple appearances, they were off the bench. Once he became the starter, he was actually tolerable, I'll say. Actually had passing numbers that were kind of, Josh Allen-esque. Which brings me back to my point that both of these guys are just really cheap options that, sure, they're probably not going to come in as a franchise quarterback, but they have that potential, and unlike Sam Darnold and Josh Allen, they're just a lot cheaper. I'd rather take these guys at their price than those guys at their price.
All right, and finishing us off at number 24, Kyle.
Yeah, our last guy here is Drew Brees. Seeing his name behind names like Haskins and Tannehill may be surprising for some people, but you have to keep in mind he's crossed the dreaded 40-year-old milestone. And with that, we've watched his average depth of target continue to go down, so you're losing a lot of big plays. He was very efficient in 2019. He led the league in completion percentage. He even threw 27 touchdowns despite only playing 11 games after that thumb injury. But he's not a long-term QB solution. He did sign a 2-year deal this offseason, and I'd be shocked if he extends past those 2 years, and that's assuming he doesn't retire after 2020. He's a decent 1 or 2 year plug-and-play guy. He should benefit from the addition of Emmanuel Sanders this season. He hasn't had a solid second wide receiver outside of his leading receiver in forever, but I'm fading him in dynasty leagues as a just-in-case veteran. If it's a super flex, you've got a guy you can start at your QB2 position, for maybe a year, or to spot start in leagues if you have a younger quarterback that might be going through some growing pains.
All right, thanks, Kyle. All right, guys. Well, that's it. That's our top 24. Time for our tags, final thoughts, and Twitter handles. Don.
Yeah, final thought is, guys, don't be afraid to take your guy. You saw our ratings fluctuate. Your dynasty team is yours. Take who you want.
Well said. Eric.
Yeah, my only note would be that I recommend everybody go out and do your own rankings. Kind of in line with what Don said, build your own rankings. It's a great test when you actually see it all listed out and compare, would I really trade this guy for that guy? It's a great exercise, even if you're not publishing anywhere.
Absolutely. It might be surprising. Kyle.
Yeah, especially in Superflex leagues, don't be afraid to go after those young guys that may go through some growing pains, but make sure you grab a veteran guy in the later rounds. He will help you out, even if it's for a year or two and a rental kind of guy. Get somebody that you can plug in when your Joe Burrow is going to play the best defense in the league.
Absolutely. That's where Tom Brady, Ben Roethlisberger, and Phillip Rivers come in. Michael.
With quarterbacks, I like to make sure that I'm taking a fair amount of risk with them. I understand that. I try to grab a lot to mitigate that risk, but it's a lot more fun to put a stamp on somebody and have them do well. And even if they don't do well, switch them out. You're not making a dynasty league faux pas and it tanks your team. You're making a week or two mistake. So the more the merrier when it comes to quarterbacks, as Kyle says, especially in Superflex leagues.
Absolutely. And though nobody told you their Twitter handles, Eric is at Eric Braun Mower. Kyle is at KAllen_4. Michael is at Michael S. Kloss. I am at JJ Wenner. And I just want to say from all of us to all of you, be safe, be well, and boat drinks, my friends. Boat drinks.